Hello everybody, this is Gregory with the Cinemarag. I hope you are doing well today. Today we're going to talk about well-known NFL quarterback Patrick Mahomes talking about how he's going to have no more children. And nice reminder of what the Catholic teaching on this subject is. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut era in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Patrick Mahomes recently announced that he and his wife Brittany have conceived their third child, and when he was at an interview, he mentioned, and I'll just read him, quote, "I'm done. I'll say that. I said 3 and I'm done." So he's probably going to have a snip. He wants to continue. I always wanted to have kids young. We're having our third kid now to join our family, and Brittany does a great job of doing that, and we will still go out and enjoy our life and let our kids see great things. Enjoy our life. Mahomes is 28. His wife's roughly the same age. I just find this to be sad because one of the classic tropes of why you don't have a lot of kids is maybe you don't have enough money to have a lot of kids. Mahomes doesn't have this problem. Clearly, he's recently, not that long ago, signed a $500 million contract. He has plenty of money. So he and his wife, Brittany, could have, like Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers, well-known NFL quarterback, played in the league for over 10 years. Catholic, had 10 kids. 10 kids. You never heard him in the news unless it was Catholic outlets. But 10 kids. Mahomes could have 10 kids. But see, the thing is, non-Catholics, even Christians, Protestant Christians, but even nominal Catholics, they would think that what I'm saying is weird and bizarre and strange. You should be like, well, if they only want to have 3 kids, they should only have 3 kids. They can, as he says, want to enjoy their life, go out and enjoy their life. And it's somehow like having a lot of kids would somehow stymie the ability to go out and have fun and enjoy your life. And so this is one of the kind of pitfalls in Catholic social teaching, no doubt, since the 60s with the sexual revolution and the invention of the birth control pill and all these things, is there's a significant amount of Catholics that contracept. If you look at the statistics, and sadly this would be Catholics in name only, but even like people who go to Mass relatively often, it's one of those, yeah, I know what the church teaches, but ... the cafeteria Catholics. And this is pretty pervasive, the kind of form of, I'll have as many kids as I want. Now, the chorus to this, the retort is, what do you expect? Women are just brood mares and they're just going to just have kids and 8, 9 kids and be depressed and do Andrea Yates. If you remember who Andrea Yates was, sadly, it was that woman that drowned her 5 kids. They're just going to go loco and just kill all their kids, and you just expect to be tied and handcuffed to the oven. The classic kind of second, third wave feminist retort to this. And I would say, no, look, we'll focus on Mahomes, and then we can talk about just why the church teaches that kids are a blessing and what are the pitfalls of using artificial contraception or in vitro and all these things. So Mahomes, I think, would identify himself as a Christian, and it's pretty pervasive in the Protestant world to contracept or whatever you want to, natural family plan, or decide to have as many kids as you want. And the way I look at Mahomes is he's very wealthy. They could have plenty of kids. And maybe he should talk to Philip Rivers, because more often than not, when you see families with large families, a lot of kids, they tend to be pretty happy. The siblings are glad that they have these siblings. And talk to only kids. Like when only children see big families, there's a part of them that just craves to have had that. They crave to have had that. Now the retort to that is, I like being the only kid because I get all the attention and affection. But as a whole, large kids, large families, people love that stuff. And it's just sad to hear Mahomes, because he's a public figure, right? So when he goes out in public and it's reported in the press, oh, Mahomes is seen as a role model. I don't think athletes or celebrities should be seen as role models. But when he says something like that, or when the Kardashians use IVF or whatnot, or have kids out of wedlock, or fill in the blank has kids out of wedlock, this is impactful to the common American, because they think, well, I look up to this person. And how many guys look up to Patrick Mahomes' talent as a quarterback and like, oh, he's going to snip, vasectomize himself after 3 kids, or she's going to do a tubal ligation, whatever it is. I'm thinking probably, knowing the dynamic of this couple, he's the one who's going to get the snip. We could do a separate video, in my opinion, on Brittany Mahomes. They were high school sweethearts, and the kind of the transformation she's had from from being, you could say, relatively traditional to being a glamour girl who's on Sports Illustrated covers, and is really falling in. And I would say Patrick as well seems to be falling into the kind of prodigal son, the first part of the prodigal son narrative, of just falling for all the glamour of wealth and the glamour of evil, as we would say. And so it's quite sad to have him think that enjoying life is best when you only have 3 kids. There's that old phrase, no one ever regrets having too many kids on their deathbed. Now, granted, there could be exceptions, like if one of your kids ends up being a role model, or I should say a serial killer. But most people are not like, you know what, I regret having one of my kids. I wish I had less kids. More often than not, at the end of your life, you wish you had more kids. And sadly, we've had this kind of sexual revolution, sex positive movement, kind of best maybe epitomized in terms of pop culture with the Sex and the City TV show that used to be on HBO, that the best thing for women is to kind of squander their most reproductive years, their most beautiful years, the years that they would have the best chance of getting a good man, and just squander it by living a dissolute lifestyle, and then only later in their 30s or 40s regret it, because at that point a lot of them are disillusioned because they've had a lot of relationships. Even Candace Bushnell, the creator of Sex and the City, the original book, she's come out openly and said, I regret writing that book and the lifestyle, because she essentially she never had kids. And when you're younger, you have this kind of glamorous life, and then you regret having kids. And I just think I lament the fact that the Mahomes family thinks after 3 kids and they're only 20 that they're done. But this is kind of a pervasive view that kids are a liability, kids stunt your social life, kids make your life not as fruitful and productive. And it's so far from the truth. And I think it kind of tells you how far we've fallen away from the traditional view of children, which is big families are a blessing. Big families are a blessing. Now, when it comes to Catholic social teaching on this, it's pretty simple. We make the vows in the wedding, in the nuptial mass, that we are open to children. It's not open to children for 3 years, or it's not open to children until I don't feel like having any more kids. Sadly, you see this in some marriages where one spouse is gonna be like, yeah, if we get married, I want to have 4 kids, and then after 2 kids, one of them says, I'm out, I don't want any more kids. That's duplicitous, and that could actually be grounds for annulment. But we make a vow to be open to having kids. And so the traditional Catholic rubric, framework is kids, if they happen, God's blessing. Up until your whatever age. Look at Queen Charlotte, George III's wife, famous king, the one that we left England for in the American Revolution, ended up having, I think it was like 19 kids. Just crazy kids. I mean, not crazy kids. Queen Victoria had 9 kids. There's people that I used to teach in Sunday school who have 10 children. And so it's God's will. If it happens, it happens. We don't do anything to stymie that, to prevent that. And we just, if kids come, kids come. That's in kind of the most reductionist way, the Catholic teaching on that. We don't do anything to interfere with that. And what would interfere with that? Well, coitus interruptus, coitus reservatus, using the pill, even if it's for acne or whatever, because the pill, I mean, most forms of the pill or the hybrids, the injections or whatever, serve as an abortifacient. It will abort the child because the lining of the uterus is so thin that any baby that is conceived can't grab on, for lack of a better word, to the uterine lining. And so anything that interrupts with that is gravely immoral, because we think of God's first commandment to us, be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. And we are not intended to interfere with that in any way, shape, or form. And of course, the gravest examples of this would be abortion. This idea that abortion is legal, makes it okay, is something that sadly we have to tell our children over and over and over. And sadly, when we have politicians that support abortion, late-term abortion, which is even more heinous, it's even more of an uphill battle for us Catholics. And so the Catholics who believe that you should be completely open to life when you marry, and ideally it should be only when you're married, the marital act, all the way until God allows women to go menopausal. This is a very minority view. Now, for traditional Catholics, which I think that tend to be the majority of the people who watch my content, this might not be your minority view, but no doubt in your extended family, in my extended family, and certainly in the general world, this view of having as many kids as God wants you to have is seen as anathema. And I think it goes back to just the sin of pride, because ultimately it's, I know what's best for me. I want this, I want 2 kids and that's it. And then I will sterilize myself. And as Pope Paul VI mentioned in Humanae Vitae, and God, how prescient was that document written in the mid-60s? And he predicted all of it. And if you've never read it, it's a very short document. And it's been some time since I've read it, but when you separate the procreative act from the unitive act, it's chaos. Because what ends up happening is you essentially objectify your partner for sexual pleasure. And so you essentially sexually gratify yourself into your partner. I don't want to be too explicit here, but you're just using each other. No doubt, even if you're married and married out, you could use each other. But in general, once you separate the procreative act from the marital act, the unitive act, I should say, it leads to chaos. And so you can look at it both ways. So most people will separate the unitive from the procreative and just have sex, recreational sex, with no risk of having children. And that just leads to the objectification of your partners, and you're just using each other. And then you look on the other way, when we separate the procreative act from the unitive act, you see the perils of in vitro fertilization. We have a video here why that is so perilous. You can see how many of these babies that we have, these embryos that are frozen. Some estimates it's a couple million just in America. These children, because they are alive, they have the male and female DNA. They have conceived. They have a soul. Now they're in this peril where what do you do with these embryos? Because you can't just really dispose of them, even though these labs do to eventually dispose of them. But legally, you can't really adopt them. And you see, it's just chaos. You see the selective reduction that happens during in vitro, where they shoot up the woman with Clomid, and so she can have more eggs, and therefore results in more conception. And so you could have 6 viable embryos, and then they have to determine. Because more often than not, despite the octomom, more often than not, they're going to have to selectively reduce, which is a euphemism to kill, some of these embryos, so the other ones have a better chance of surviving. So we are murdering children in that regard. And you just see the perils of this whole thing. And it's just exceedingly sad. And to me, what's exceedingly sad about it is most people don't see it as exceedingly sad. Thy will be done. I've mentioned so many times, like, how do we align our life? We look at 2 examples in the New Testament, Mary's fiat and Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Mary's fiat, I'm the servant of the Lord, be it done unto me according to thy word. This is the way we need to align ourselves. Jesus in the garden, he knows what's going to happen. He even says, I want to please pass this cup of suffering, but thy will be done. Right? Thy will be done. We must align our will to God's will, instead of the sin of hubris and pride where we align our will. We want God to align his will with our will. Oh God, we've had these teachings forever. Now you don't know what you're talking about. No, it's totally fine to do sexual Frankenstein and sterilize ourselves, or have these babies frozen in labs. Nah, God, you don't know any better. The natural order makes no sense. I know better. You don't know better. You've been propagandized and indoctrinated thinking that this is the right way. You don't know better. Thy will be done. And if you marry and you make that promise on the altar, I am open to children. It's open to children the entire marriage. And yes, I'm not questioning, especially if you're poor, it can be very difficult to have 7 children. They did it back in the day, right? But I'm not saying it's not hard, but that's the way it's intended. And as Catholics, if we do get married, that needs to be the understanding, is that yes, we might have a lot of kids that come from this marriage, but kids are a blessing. Kids are an enjoyment. They make us less selfish, and they bring such enjoyment, even though they drive us crazy. They bring such enjoyment to our life. And we need to understand that we cannot conform God's will to our will. We need to do it the other way around. That is the whole point of prayer, is to align our will to God's will. So in closing, Patrick Mahomes, hopefully you will change your mind and have more children, because children are a blessing. And for those of you who are on the fence about the church's teaching on this stuff, please just investigate the catechism, go to podcasts, and try to understand the church's centuries teaching on this, and align your will, because the church founded by Jesus Christ knows better, and align your will to that teaching. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless. And